The wind howled across the dry plains, carrying dust like ashes from a long-dead fire. Clara Dawson stood at the edge of her porch, her fingers tightening around a crust of stale bread. The cracked wood beneath her boots creaked with a language only loneliness understood. She watched the horizon, the way it shimmered with heat, like a mirage of all the things she had lost. It had been 3 years since the raid. 3 years since her husband Ethan and their 6-year-old son Caleb were buried under the cottonwood tree behind the house. That morning still stalked her dreams. Fire licking the barn walls, screams swallowed by the sound of gunfire, and the unmistakable whoop of war cries tearing through the air. The sheriff said it was Apaches. Everyone believed it. Clara had believed it too at first. Now she wasn't sure what she believed. Only that she was alone. And that the only warmth left in her life came from the bread she baked once a week, more out of habit than hunger. The storm clouds brewing in the west promised rain, but Clara knew better. They were just shadows in motion like everything else out here. She turned to head inside, cradling the bread in her hands like something sacred. The silence of the house met her like a slap. Walls that once echoed with laughter now held only memories. She placed the bread on the table and paused. Something was wrong. A sound barely there. A faint scraping, like metal against stone. Her eyes narrowed. She crossed to the front door, stepped off the porch and scanned the yard. Nothing moved except the tall grass whispering secrets to the wind. Then she heard it again. By the well. Cautiously, rifle slung over one shoulder, she crept forward. Her heart beat with the slow, heavy rhythm of dread. As she neared, she saw the figure, small, crumpled, motionless. A boy. Apache. She froze. Her breath caught somewhere between fear and disbelief. The boy was no more than 11, his skin smudged with dirt and blood. He wore no shirt, only leather trousers torn at the knees. An arrowhead necklace hung around his neck, sticky with dried blood. His right side was slick with crimson, a gunshot wound just under the ribs. His chest rose in shallow, desperate breaths. Clara stood there, unmoving. Her rifle slipped from her shoulder, landing with a soft thud in the dirt. Everything inside her screamed to walk away. Let nature take him. No one would blame her. No one would know. And yet, her son's face came unbidden to her mind. His laughter. The way he used to sneak bread from the oven before it cooled. She knelt. The boy's eyelids fluttered. One eye swollen. His lips were cracked. He tried to speak, but no sound came. Clara reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the bread. She tore a piece and held it to his mouth. His lips trembled. Then he bit, slow, cautious, like he didn't trust it. "You're gonna choke if you don't chew," she muttered. He blinked at her, eyes full of something unreadable. Not gratitude. Not trust. Something closer to confusion. Or fear. She pressed her hand to his side and felt the sticky heat of the wound. Fresh. Maybe half a day old. He'd been running. From what, she didn't know. But if he'd made it all the way to her well, he was desperate. Clara looked back toward the house. Her breath left her in a shaky sigh. Then she stood. "You die out here, you'll come back as a coyote," she said half to herself. "Don't reckon I need another one of those howling outside my window." She bent and lifted him. He was light, frighteningly so. The smell of sweat, iron, and earth clung to him. He winced as she carried him toward the house, but he didn't protest. He didn't have the strength to. Inside, Clara laid him on the couch and lit a lantern. The pale glow cast long shadows against the walls. She found her sewing kit and boiled water in the fireplace. She'd stitched wounds before, on cattle, Ethan, herself, but this was different. This was a line she didn't know she should cross. "God help me," she whispered. She cut away the boy's trousers around the wound and cleaned it gently. He jerked and moaned softly. When she poured whiskey into the open flesh, he screamed, a sound too small for the pain it carried. She held him down and kept working, lips pressed tight against her own emotions. She didn't speak as she stitched, and neither did he. When it was done, she covered him with a blanket and sat in the old rocking chair, the fire painting everything gold and orange. Outside, the wind had settled. In here, the storm had just begun. Later that night, Clara awoke to coughing. She dozed off in the chair. The boy was trying to sit up. His eyes found her, wide and dark, glinting in the firelight. "Stay still," she said, rising. He whispered something, too soft to catch. Clara leaned closer. "What was that?" He took a shaky breath. "Kohani." She frowned. "Is that your name?" He said nothing, just stared. There was an intensity in him, like he saw through her. She didn't like it. "You should rest," she muttered. "That wound's gonna tear open if you keep wriggling like a fish in a bucket." He lay back reluctantly, his breathing shallow but steady. Clara returned to the chair and picked up her knitting, an old habit she couldn't seem to break, though the sweaters never had anyone to wear them. She studied him. The boy was just a child. One caught in a world that didn't make space for kindness. Just like hers hadn't. The crackle of the fire was the only sound between them. Outside, the coyotes began their morning song. She spoke softly, mostly to the room. I had a boy once. Blonde hair, bright eyes. Named Caleb. He'd be your age now. The boy said nothing, but she sensed he was listening. I lost him. Lost everything that day. Her voice trembled slightly. Thought maybe if I stayed angry enough, I'd never feel anything again. She paused. Then you came along. Bleeding all over my damn porch. Something shifted in the boy's face. A twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile, closer to recognition. She sighed and leaned back. Tomorrow we'll see if you can keep down some broth. And maybe I'll get your name straight. He didn't answer. She closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of the chair soothe her. The peace didn't last. Just before dawn, Clara jolted upright. Not from a sound inside, but one outside. Distant but unmistakable. Hoofbeats. Not one. Not two. A group. She stood, rifle already in her hand. The boy stirred, eyes wide. You expecting company? She asked dryly. He shook his head, face pale. Clara moved to the window and peeked through the curtain. Dark shapes moved along the ridge, riders, silhouetted against the growing light. They weren't moving fast. They weren't hiding either. She turned back to him. You bring someone with you? He hesitated, then nodded. Family? He nodded again. Clara lowered the rifle slowly. Her pulse thudded in her throat. Let's hope they're feeling friendly. The boy looked at her, his voice dry and cracked but clear. They will be. You gave bread. She blinked. He repeated, firmer this time. You gave bread. You're safe now. Clara didn't know what to say. She looked out at the approaching riders, then back at the boy wrapped in her late husband's blanket. The wind rustled the curtains. In the distance, the first light of dawn began to peel the night away. She stood still for a long time, then whispered, more to herself than anyone else. God help me if you're wrong. But part of her hoped he was right. The morning came with a reluctant sun, veiled by thin clouds that dulled the landscape to shades of pale gold and gray. Clara moved through her small kitchen, spooning broth from a simmering pot into a chipped bowl. The boy, Taza, she now knew his name, lay resting on the old couch, a sheen of sweat on his forehead and his breathing shallow but steadier than the day before. She approached with the bowl, its steam curling upward like a silent offering. He looked at her as she knelt beside him, those dark eyes tracking her every move. Suspicion still lingered there, but so did something else, something quieter. Trust, perhaps, beginning to germinate in soil that had known only survival. Try this, she said, lifting the spoon. Won't taste like much, but it'll keep you upright. Taza hesitated before parting his lips. She fed him slowly, watching as he swallowed, his jaw tense. His gaze never left hers. Clara wiped a bit of broth from his chin with a rag and sat back on her heels. Where are they? She asked quietly. The ones from last night. Taza looked toward the window but said nothing. You don't have to tell me everything, she added. Just enough to know if I should be loading more than firewood today. He shook his head, then pointed to his chest. Mother. Paya. The name was strange on his tongue, clipped and soft. She was there. Another nod. Then faintly, they watch first. Always. Clara exhaled. Then let's hope they liked what they saw. She rose and poured the rest of the broth into a small pot to keep warm. Outside, the day had fully broken, and the town of Coyote Ridge sat 5 miles east, unaware, or perhaps not caring, that Clara Dawson had taken in the child of their oldest fear. She didn't bother saddling her horse that day. Instead, she ventured into the woods behind her homestead on foot, a basket slung over one arm. Herbs, willow bark, dried lavender, anything that might help with pain. She walked briskly, the rhythm of her boots tamping the earth with certainty, though her thoughts remained scattered. When she returned just past noon, she found Taza sitting upright, the blanket wrapped tightly around his shoulders like a second skin. His face was pale, but there was color in his eyes now. Alertness. He tried to stand when he saw her, legs wobbling. Easy, she warned, rushing to steady him. He allowed it but looked ashamed. No one's keeping score, she muttered. He glanced at her with a frown, unfamiliar with the phrase. She didn't explain. That evening, as the fire cracked and spit orange light across the room, Clara read aloud from an old book. Taza said nothing but watched her mouth as she spoke, his eyes occasionally flicking to the page. Later, as she cleaned a knife and stirred the embers, she asked, "You know how to read?" He shook his head. "No paper in Canyon." "Well," she said, poking the fire, "maybe we can fix that." It was a fragile piece they built over the next few days. Taza regained his strength in silence, speaking only when necessary, but he watched Clara with quiet intensity. She found herself talking more than usual, telling stories about life before, about Ethan and Caleb, about long rides into town and apple picking in the hills. He listened like her words were firelight, warming something cold inside him. But the outside world, she knew, would not warm so easily. On the 6th day, Clara hitched her wagon and rode into town for supplies. The general store was quiet, save for the old bell above the door that rang her arrival. Mr. Blevins, the storekeeper, squinted at her from behind his counter. "Well, if it ain't Miss Dawson," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Thought you were dead or gone." "Still here," she replied. "Need flour, salt, and some kerosene." He nodded, began gathering items. "Heard someone spotted you out by the pines." "Weren't alone," they said. Clara's stomach twisted. "Can't throw a stone out there without hitting a rabbit." "That right," Blevins said. "Funny thing, the rabbit had long hair and no shoes from what I heard." She met his gaze squarely. "You calling me a liar?" He held up a hand, placating. "No, ma'am. Just saying the town's nervous. After what happened to your family, they figure you'd be the last one keeping Apache company." Clara leaned forward. "You ever think maybe we were wrong about that raid?" Blevins blinked. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying a boy bleeding out at my well isn't a warrior. He's a child. That's a child who grows up to shoot your kind." "Maybe not," Clara said, voice tight. "Maybe he grows up knowing someone gave him a chance when no one else would." She took her supplies and left without another word. By the time she returned home, her pulse still beat with anger. She found Taza outside, walking slowly around the house, testing his strength. When he saw her, he smiled, barely, but it was the first time he'd done so. She handed him a slice of fresh bread. He took it and bowed his head. That night, a rabbit carcass was nailed to her doorframe. Blood still fresh. No note. None needed. Clara didn't flinch. She removed it with one hand, threw it into the woods, and bolted the door. Taza had seen it too. He didn't ask, but his fingers curled tight around the bone pendant at his neck. His expression was unreadable. "They want you gone," Clara said. "They think you're a threat." "I can leave." "No," she answered quickly. "Not until you're well." Taza looked down, then said, "They won't stop." "I know." The next morning she found tracks in the dirt. Boots. More than one pair. They circled the house but didn't approach. A message, not an action. That same afternoon, a figure appeared at the edge of the woods. Not on horseback. Standing. Watching. Clara stepped outside, rifle at her side. The figure didn't move. Then, slowly, she emerged from the trees. A woman. Tall. Hair woven into a long braid, skin bronzed and lined by sun and time. She wore a beaded tunic and carried no weapon, but her presence was commanding. Taza stepped outside and said a word Clara didn't know. "Paya," he said again. Clara's breath caught. This was his mother. They faced one another for a long moment, neither speaking. The woman's eyes swept over Clara, then settled on Taza. Her expression softened. Paya stepped forward, placed her hands on her son's shoulders, and examined his wound. Then she turned to Clara. "You saved him," she said in slow, deliberate English. "I fed him," Clara replied, "and stitched the hole in his side. That is saving." Clara nodded. "I did not come to fight," Paya continued. "We watched. Many nights. You did not call the men with guns. I figured he had enough holes in him already." A ghost of a smile tugged at Paya's lips. Then she said, "You come to the canyon. My people must see the one who gave bread." Clara blinked. "Why?" "Because you changed something," Paya answered. "They must understand how." Taza looked up at Clara, waiting. Clara hesitated. Her whole life had taught her to fear these people, to paint them with one color, enemy. But this boy had bled on her floor and woken something in her that no grave could bury. She nodded slowly. "I'll come." Paya bowed slightly. At dusk, we return. As the sun lowered, painting the horizon in fire and ash, Clara packed light. A canteen. A knife. A strip of dried meat. She left her rifle but took the boy's hand. They walked in silence, Paya leading, the boy in the middle, Clara behind. The prairie stretched out before them, wide and unforgiving, but now holding the faintest promise of something new. By the time the stars began to flicker in the sky, the three figures were swallowed by the darkness, heading toward the canyon, toward understanding or danger or both. Anne Clara Dawson, once a woman made of ash and silence, walked forward with her heart thudding louder than her boots on the trail. The canyon swallowed them. Clara followed the narrow trail behind Paya, the terrain changing from flat scrubland to red rock cliffs rising like the bones of the earth. Shadows stretched long across the stone as dusk settled in, painting everything in shades of blood and ember. Taza walked just ahead of her, his steps steady now, the wound on his side healing into something manageable. He said little, but the grip he occasionally gave her hand told her enough. Clara kept her senses sharp. The walls of the canyon pressed inward, tall enough to muffle wind and sound alike. Birds circled far overhead, black against the fading light. The deeper they walked, the more the outside world fell away. No more prairie. No more town. No more Coyote Ridge and its rotting threats nailed to doors. This place was older. It breathed. They came to a ledge overlooking a flat basin rimmed with sandstone. Fires burned in a loose circle below, flickering golden halos around tents and shelters woven from hides and branches. Children played near one fire, their laughter distant but unmistakable. Men sharpened knives, carved wood, stirred pots. Women gathered herbs, tended to embers, whispered in clusters. Paya stopped and turned. "They wait," she said simply. Clara's heart thudded in her chest. She swallowed but nodded. As they descended into the camp, eyes turned. Some faces hardened. Others simply watched. No one raised a weapon, but the weight of suspicion hung thick in the air. Clara kept her chin up, hands visible, moving like she belonged there even though every instinct told her she didn't. They led her to a low stone circle, already surrounded by seated elders. Their eyes, sharp, weathered, unreadable, tracked her every move. Taza sat beside her, his face unreadable. One elder, tall and wrapped in furs despite the heat, leaned forward. His voice, when it came, was rough stone on wood. "Why does she come?" Paya didn't flinch. "She gave food. She gave care. To one of ours." Another elder spoke. "Because she caused harm before." "No," Paya answered. Her hands were clean. Clara stepped forward, unsure if she was allowed but unwilling to be silent. "I didn't know what he was when I found him," she said. "Only that he was bleeding and would die without help. That's all I needed to know." A murmur rippled through the gathering. The tall elder raised one hand and silence returned. Clara's throat was dry but she pressed on. "My husband, and my son, they were killed in a raid 3 years ago. Everyone said it was your people." No one interrupted her. "Not yet. I believed it. I carried that hatred. Let it rot me from the inside." Her voice cracked slightly but she kept it steady. "But I see now. We were lied to. Blinded. Used." An old woman, her hair white as bone, leaned forward. "Why come here? Why not stay where the ground is safe and the guns are ready?" Clara looked around the circle. "Because I think you deserve to know who saved your boy. And I need to know who he is too." That answer hung in the firelight like smoke. Paya spoke again. "Let her stay the night. Let her see." The elders said nothing for a time, then the tall one gave a nod. Taza led her away from the circle to a small shelter near a stream. They sat together as the fireflies rose and the wind shifted. Somewhere nearby, someone played a flute, slow, mournful, beautiful. Clara leaned back against a warm rock, her muscles aching from the journey, but her thoughts sharp. Taza spoke, his voice soft. "My father died before I could remember him." Clara looked over. "I'm sorry." "War. Not this one. The last. War always leaves someone smaller behind." He nodded. "You lost your son?" "Yes," she whispered. "They told me it was Apache. I thought you all were monsters." Taza's gaze didn't leave her. "Now," Clara paused. "Now I see that people do evil things and wear other men's faces to get away with it." The boy considered that. "My uncle said your people want land. Not peace." "They want both," she admitted. "But the ones who want land don't want to share. They use fear to take it." Taza reached into the pouch at his side and pulled out a carved bone token. He held it out. Clara took it gently. It was worn smooth, engraved with a symbol, 2 joined hands and a river between them. "My father made it," he said. "It means unity." Clara turned it in her fingers. "It's beautiful. That's why they hunted us." He tried to talk to the settlers. "Bring peace." They killed him for it. The silence between them grew thick. Later that night, Clara walked with Paya along the edge of the cliffs, the stars burning low and close. The canyon glowed with life. Fires, songs, voices carried lightly through the dark. "I've seen more hope in this place in one night than I've seen in 3 years back home," Clara said. Paya stared at the sky. "Hope is fragile. It must be watched." They stopped by a narrow ridge where herbs grew in clusters along the rocks. Paya bent to gather some, her fingers skilled, careful. "I didn't know your people lived like this," Clara said quietly. "You weren't meant to," Paya replied. "The world wants you to fear us. That's how it keeps you angry." "Fear keeps everyone angry," Clara murmured. Paya looked at her. "And anger keeps the graves full." Clara looked out across the camp. Children chased each other between tents. An old man mended a pair of moccasins with meticulous care. Laughter drifted in faintly. "They're not ready to trust me," Clara said. "Not yet. But you do." "I trust bread," Paya said, smiling faintly. "And I trust what a mother does when she sees her child in another's arms." They stood in silence a moment longer, then returned to the shelter. Before dawn, the peace shattered. A sharp whistle sliced the air. Then hooves, many of them, pounding against the canyon rim. Shouts. English. Clara bolted upright. Taza was already on his feet. "What is it?" she demanded, grabbing her boots. "Men," he said. "Guns." Paya burst into the shelter, eyes blazing. "You were followed." "No," Clara breathed. "No, I was careful." "A scout watched from the ridge," Paya snapped. "They moved after dark." Clara's heart pounded. "They think I was taken." Paya shook her head. "They don't care. They see only an excuse." Outside, warriors were already gathering. Some had bows. Others carried old rifles. Children were ushered away. The elders stood with grim resolve. Clara stepped forward. "Let me speak to them." Paya stared at her. "They will not listen." "Then let me try." "You will be killed." "I'm already dead to them," Clara said. "This is the only way." Before Paya could stop her, Clara climbed the trail leading to the canyon edge. The light was rising, pink and gold over the rock. When she reached the top, she saw them, at least a dozen men, most from town, their rifles raised. The sheriff sat atop a brown gelding, his mouth twisted in something between concern and rage. "Clara," he called. "Get away from them." "They're not hurting anyone," she shouted back. "Put down your guns. You've been with them too long. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying. This isn't justice. It's a massacre waiting to happen." He urged his horse forward. "You think they'd spare you? If they weren't hiding something, why'd they keep you out here?" Clara stepped forward, arms wide. "They saved my life. Just like I saved his." A murmur passed through the riders. Clara took another step. "If you fire, you start something none of us can finish." The sheriff raised his rifle. A shot cracked. Clara flinched. It wasn't aimed at her. Down in the canyon, a young warrior had fired into the air. Warning or mistake, she didn't know. But it was enough. The posse raised their weapons. The sheriff barked an order. Clara screamed. Then another shot, closer. A bullet hissed past her ear. "Stop!" she cried, her voice raw. "Please?" The standoff had begun. And Clara Dawson, standing alone at the mouth of the canyon, between one world and another, knew the next decision could burn everything to ash. The sun crested over the canyon rim, staining the sky with a palette of gold and crimson, beautiful and ominous all at once. Clara stood exposed on the ridge, her arms still raised, breath shallow and burning. Below her, warriors prepared for battle, bows strung, rifles primed. Above, a dozen men on horseback, nerves taut, fingers ghosting over triggers. Between them all, her. One woman with no shield, no army, and no authority, save for the one thing neither side fully understood yet: conviction. The sheriff's rifle was still aimed at her chest. Sweat trickled down his temple, though the morning air was crisp. His jaw tensed beneath his thick mustache, a muscle twitching in protest at her defiance. "You don't move, Clara," he barked. "Don't make this worse." "You already made it worse," she called back, voice clear and cutting. "You came here with rifles. You came ready to kill." "They're hiding behind rocks," he snapped. "What did you expect? They're protecting their children. You brought your fear. They brought their dead." Someone behind the sheriff shifted in the saddle, uneasy. The balance teetered like a plank across a canyon. One misstep and everything would fall. Paya appeared beside Clara, silent and unarmed. The morning light painted her face in copper and shadow, her gaze steady as she looked across at the sheriff. "Call off your men," Clara said. "Let me talk to them. I can end this." The sheriff didn't blink. You think they'll listen to you? I think they already did, she said. And I think it's time you did too. For a breathless second, nothing moved. Then behind her, a rustle. Taza climbed the trail, stepping beside Clara and Paya. He stood tall despite his slight frame, despite the fresh scar under his ribs, despite the fear lining his eyes. He held up the carved token, his father's, the symbol of peace. Sunlight kissed the bone as he raised it high for all to see. The canyon hushed. Even the horses stopped shifting. Clara looked at the sheriff. You remember that boy you hanged 2 years ago? 17, dark-skinned, said he was just looking for water? The sheriff frowned. Your men caught him by the well, Clara continued. No trial. No questions. Just rope and wood. He was trespassing, the sheriff muttered. He was lost. And that's all it takes, isn't it? To be different. To be inconvenient. You can't see them as humans, so you make them the enemy. You let men wear Apache feathers to burn my barn, to kill my son. You let lies fester because truth costs too much. Her voice rose, sharp and trembling. Well, the cost's right here. And it's bleeding from both sides. The sheriff lowered his rifle a fraction. His men exchanged uncertain glances. But fear's grip is not easily loosened. A shot rang out. It came from the ridge, a twitchy young rider, eyes wild, fingers fast. Clara turned just in time to see Paya's shoulder jerk backward, crimson blooming across her tunic. Taza screamed. Before Clara could react, arrows flew from below. Then gunfire erupted, sharp, blinding. The canyon echoed with chaos. Men shouted, horses reared, boots pounded the earth. Clara threw herself forward, dragging Paya down behind a rock as bullets chipped stone and dust stung her eyes. Taza crouched beside them, trembling but alive. No! Clara shouted into the storm. Stop. Please. She crawled up the slope, desperate, exposed. Gunfire crackled above her like thunder. Someone on horseback screamed and fell. An Apache rifle cracked in response. Smoke filled the air. She reached the summit and raised her hands again, hoarse from shouting. Stop this. Stop it. Her voice was drowned in violence. Then, another crack. Pain tore through her shoulder. She spun, collapsing, the world tilting sideways as her body hit hard ground. Faces blurred. Thus, screams. Taza's voice crying her name. Her vision narrowed. But not into darkness. Into memory. Caleb, her son, running through wildflowers. Laughing. His small hand in hers. The way his head tilted when he was curious, just like Taza's. She saw him so clearly it hurt more than the bullet. Then, another voice. Deeper. Rough. Ethan, whispering to her in the barn after a long day. You've always been the brave one, Clara. I just held the reins. She blinked and felt her body dragged, felt strong hands lifting her. Then a shadow fell over her, Paya, despite the wound, standing tall, shielding her with her own body. Blood stained her sleeve, but her grip was steady on the knife at her belt. Clara's breath rattled in her lungs. Below, the warriors ceased fire. Above, the sheriff raised his hand. Silence fell again, brittle and uneasy. Taza stood on the highest point of the ridge, arms spread wide. She is family, he cried out in English. You shoot her, you shoot me. His voice cracked. No more death. A hush. The sheriff looked down the barrel of his rifle at the boy. Then past him. Then at Clara, pale but breathing, held by a woman he'd once sworn was his enemy. His gun dropped to his side. Hold your fire, he yelled. All of you. The canyon stilled. One by one, weapons lowered. Paya turned to Clara, her face a blend of pain and defiance. You live, she said, gently pressing a hand to Clara's bleeding shoulder. You must. Clara winced. I wasn't planning on dying just yet. Later, after the wounded were tended and the dead mourned, the canyon was quiet again. The posse retreated, some grumbling, others solemn. The sheriff said little before leaving. He gave Clara a long, unreadable look before he turned his horse and disappeared beyond the horizon. Days passed. Clara healed slowly, the wound knitting together as the ache faded. She stayed in the canyon, welcome now as more than guest. She helped grind herbs, stirred stews, learned the names of the children, shared stories by the fire. She stood by Paya when a young warrior was buried, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply showed up, again and again, until presence meant more than apology. Taza rarely left her side. He read now, slowly, carefully, sounding out words by firelight. Clara taught him with patience, correcting gently, celebrating every page. One night, as stars spilled across the sky and coyotes howled in the distance, Taza pressed the carved token into Clara's palm again. "It's yours now," he said. She tried to protest, but he shook his head. "You carry peace," he said. "You gave bread. You gave blood. That is what the token means." Clara swallowed hard, fingers closing around the warm bone. A week later she returned to her homestead. Alone for now. The house was still standing, porch crooked, curtains fluttering in the window. It had changed and so had she. She rebuilt slowly. Mended the barn. Painted the door. Planted new herbs beneath the window. Each motion a reclamation. A refusal to let the past bury her. Taza visited often, sometimes with others. They brought dried meat, woven cloth, medicine. She gave them books, tools, stories. In time, a path formed between the canyon and the homestead, worn not by war but by footsteps. The town watched, warily at first, but time does strange things. One child asked Taza to teach her a word in his language. A farmer offered firewood. Someone painted over the slur on Clara's gate. She didn't expect everyone to change, but enough did. Enough to matter. Clara stood once more on her porch, the sky wide and infinite above her. The carved token hung from a leather cord around her neck. Her fingers found it instinctively. A shadow passed by the well, just a rabbit this time. No blood. No warning. The wind moved through the grass, soft and aimless. She thought of bread and bullets, of silence and song, of her son's laughter and the way Taza smiled now when he read aloud. A voice stirred in her chest, a narration she couldn't place but knew she had to speak. "If kindness can survive out here," she whispered, "then maybe we can too." She stepped off the porch into the sun. And this time she walked without fear.